Video games. It's time to talk about video games, or specifically one video game that is on brand for us, that being Avengers. Is A Day in the title? Is that official? Is the title Avengers A Day, or is it still just Avengers?
No, it's just Avengers, dude. That's just the title for that trailer.
Okay then, that makes sense. So yeah, we're talking about this game. Uh, I don't know. This is We could maybe talk about other E3 stuff, but I don't think either of us have all that much to say about the rest of it. And if we wanted to, we could make that its own video. But for now, we're talking about this one developed by Square Enix in association with Marvel Entertainment. Everyone has been kind of chomping at the bit to get some kind of information about this one for a long time. I'd only just heard about it, I want to say, a couple of months, 5 to 6 months ago, and apparently it's been like a couple of years since this has been announced, and everyone's just been like, "Oh, gee, Square Enix doing an Avengers game? Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what this is." And especially coming off of Spider-Man PS4, the hype has only even increased, and so now that we've actually got, material and footage and a little bit of gameplay and some a presentation with some discussion about what we're in for. Some people remain excited, others not so much. I find myself in a little bit of a gray area camp, but there's some particular bits of criticism that both of us have kind of seen, and that Malik especially has been meaning to give some thoughts on. So I don't know if you want to open with some of that or what.
Well, I'll get to that. I want to start off with just how I felt about this game from the get-go. So, last year, before Spider-Man PS4 came out, Shadow of the Tomb Raider came out. And Square Enix is responsible for the revamped kind of trilogy of Tomb Raider games now, with a new kind of more realistic and grounded take on Lara Croft and her adventures. I only played bits and pieces of the first two. The third one is the only one I've played in its entirety, and I freaking loved it. That's the last game they put out, and so I was just from that alone, I was very confident in what they would do with the Avengers, because I love that game so much. It was my favorite game of my second favorite game of last year, and so I was really excited to see finally see some footage of their Avengers game and what it would be, because we knew that it would also be an original story, but that was about it. We got a teaser trailer in 2017. That was the big announcement. They showed off a teaser trailer with some voiceover and showed us the logo, and that was pretty much it. We didn't really know anything about what it would be beyond that. And I gotta say, I really appreciate that they're taking the Insomniac route and they're doing an original story, and we're gonna get a whole new kind of interpretation of the story, and we're not just retreading old ground with movies. And,
Yeah, especially since I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily say it, but I think there's kind of an instinctual sort of feeling of cheapness to just doing a movie tie-in game, and that might just be a stigma because a lot of movie tie-in games, like even non-superhero related, just tend to be really bad. But yeah, it seems like doing an original story is generally just the way to go for these types of things.
yeah, we've seen that to great effect with Spider-Man: Edge of Time. That game had a pretty solid. It was a linear game. It wasn't open world or anything, but I thought it had a pretty solid story to it. It was, fairly simple, but I really enjoyed it. And we also had, of course, Spider-Man PS4 and the Arkham games, and so all of that set a solid precedent for eventually getting to the Avengers. And Marvel has kind of been somewhat lacking in this arena as far as video games go. What they're mostly known for is kind of just, combat games. Like people have played Marvel Ultimate Alliance and they like those games, but you'll never hear anyone talk about the story of those games because it's just kind of a fairly loose framework for just, you know, fighting people with your favorite Marvel characters, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
But down to this year's E3 presentation and what they actually showed us. The big Okay, I want to get the most ridiculous criticism out of the way, and that's the graphics. This game doesn't come out for a year.
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty ridiculous to throw the complaint of graphics at this game when they still have a whole year to refine the graphics. And their last game was gorgeous and looked beautiful. Really, all the Tomb Raider games look really good. So, and plus, this is the studio behind most of the recent Final Fantasy games. And I haven't played any of those, but I've seen the gameplay, and those games look great too. So, if their previous extensive catalog of work is anything to go on, the graphics for this game will be fine by the time it actually comes out.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's even on the Nintendo side of things happening with Pokemon, where it's like, up until something is released, I would, I would say just relax with sort of like critiquing the graphics. Like, they show you what they've got. Like, this is the first we're seeing of this game. Some people, I think, are just ignorant on a number of levels, and in one case I can find it more excusable than the other, where it's like, one form of ignorance is people who just don't understand how the development process works and can't put together like, oh, this is the first they're showing us of this game that doesn't come out for a while, maybe I should adjust my expectations. Because you have people saying like, oh, well, it's been 2 years since they announced it. Like, if it's 2 years since the announcement and the game is coming out in a year, then like, why does it look this way now when they've had twice as long as they will have to do? It's like they just don't know what goes into sort of like designing this stuff. And the other sort of sphere of ignorance, which I am way more forgiving towards personally, is people who are just getting their terminology wrong and don't know the meaning of the words that they're using. So people who are like, oh gosh, the animation is so bad, or it looks so ugly, when the language that they're using would lead you to think that they're talking about the fidelity of the graphics, when really what they mean is character design and just overall aesthetic.
Well, as far as the character designs go, that leads me to like the other kind of really obnoxious complaint being lobbed at this game is the fact that they don't look like the MCU versions. Like, they don't look like the actors. They don't look like Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans or the rest of the actual Avengers cast that we've become accustomed to seeing in the Marvel movies. That was never going to happen, and even if they had the money to get the rights to the likenesses of all of those actors, and somehow had enough money to get all of them to come in and do the voices, I would not have wanted that. This isn't an MCU game; it's an original game. Like,
Yeah,
I would like for this to stand on its own, like Spider-Man PS4 did.
I definitely wouldn't like them to do the voices. I think, again, the people who would have liked the likenesses are, again, people who just kind of don't understand that costs money.
Yeah, that would have cost, like, just to get Robert Downey Jr. to agree to this, would have cost an obscene amount of money. Just damn near twice, if not 3 times as much as it would take to just make this game.
Although, again, if I can play good cop once more, especially in comparison with Spider-Man, I think that just highlights kind of the degree to which people are used to several different incarnations of Spider-Man, where Spider-Man looks different. This is kind of the first, with this being presented at E3 as like a big sort of, mainline first-party title for a system at E3, This is kind of the closest to another sort of big in the public sphere appearance that the Avengers have had outside of the movies. Spider-Man has always kind of been like a different face within the public consciousness, like since the comics pretty much. Like you've got comics Peter, you've got 70s TV show Peter, you've got 90s cartoon Peter, all the other cartoons, the movies keep rebooting. I think we're at a point, especially by the time Spidey PS4 releases, that so many people have their different definitive Peter Parker, and he looks different, and he sounds different, that no one's going to complain when, he's wholly original. The Avengers don't have that. And I'm not saying it's justified, but I do think it's explainable, where people are like, they're not used to seeing the Avengers different from the movies. Like, there's the comics, and then there's the cartoon, which hardly anybody watches. Earth's Mightiest Heroes ended a decade ago. The cartoon universe that's currently running on Disney XD, nobody talks about it. And so the only version of the Avengers that most people know or care about or associate with them, like image-wise, is the movies. And characters like Spider-Man or Superman or Batman don't have that. They don't have the one version that everybody knows and thinks about.
No, but I still don't think that's justified. I feel like that's kind of...
It's not justified. I just think that's the root of where the issue lies, is that people aren't used to it, and it's going to be a while before they're like, okay, this is a different thing. I associate the Marvel Universe with the MCU. It's a different take on the world. I just kind of have to get used to that.
And I really like the voice cast they got. Like, they got Troy Baker to play Bruce Banner.
Yeah. And the scene that plays out, like, all the casting choices I think are good choices. The scene that plays out where he and Tony are talking, that's a really well acted scene. And so it's like, hooray! If nothing else, the performances are going to be pretty neat.
Yeah, that scene got me really excited.
Yeah,
it's just a small little character scene, but I really, really liked that. Like, and I would have thought Troy Baker is the guy you would cast for Tony Stark. But putting him in the role of Bruce Banner, especially like with me just having rewatched the original Avengers again and seeing just how compelling that character can be, I'm like, they definitely have their own take for a compelling Bruce Banner, and it's coming across really well in just this one little minute scene.
Yeah. And Ham is such a great kind of obvious choice. Like, Travis Willingham just has such great range, and I've loved him ever since I listened to him as Roy Mustang in Fullmetal Alchemist for the first time. He's just great.
And he sounds much more like traditional comic book Thor. Like, I like the MCU Thor that we have now in these movies. Yes, even in Endgame, and I don't think he's just a joke in that film, as me and Nick have already stated.
Yeah.
But this does feel like the more traditional Thor that diehard comic fans liked reading and will probably like in this game.
Yeah, the guy who, he sounds like he has no problem sort of going all Shakespearean with the these and thous and keeping it kind of formal. And it'll be nice to see that, sort of played up in sort of this kind of setting.
And Laura Bailey, I love her as Catwoman in the Telltale games. She was pretty good as Mary Jane in Spider-Man PS4. I'm interested to see what they're gonna do with Black Widow in this game.
Yeah, even though of all the we just talked about how people are being kind of petty with the complaints about the designs and graphics and stuff. Although of course there's one design that we have to talk about, but the people who make memes of comparing Widow to Grace Randolph, and now I can't unsee it.
I hate that so much.
It's stuck in my mind now.
It's not stuck in mine. I pushed it out the second I saw those ridiculous memes. But anyway, as far as the actual designs go, I think pretty much all of them are fine. Like I don't Captain America's is kind of my least favorite. Like admittedly I don't like that suit. I don't like that costume at all. But at the very least I appreciate that it's not just a retreaded version of an MCU suit. Like they are just very much just doing their own costumes for this game. All the costumes are unique to this game.
Yeah, I can appreciate on the level of any of the other costumes even. It's wholly its own thing. And like you would never confuse that with another Captain America costume. But that's also kind of what I dislike about it, where it doesn't look like a Captain America costume. Hardly at all. Like other people have pointed this out, but the colors are so muted. Like you can hardly even the reds are like little stringy lines. The star is super small. It's like clearly tactical armor, but it's like so boxy it looks like hockey pads. Like I really just don't think it looks good.
That's fair. I mean, it's just an aesthetic that I'm not a fan of, but I have a hard time actually complaining about that.
And, it's one of the things that makes me hope like for outfit customization because I don't think I'm ever going to get used to that like if I'm stuck with it for like a large part of the game.
I think pretty much everyone else looks good. The aesthetic is very much that first Avengers movie, like it is like reminiscent of that. But I don't think the characters, like a lot of people said, they look too similar to the MCU versions. I can see that they look, obviously fairly reminiscent, but I don't feel like they're trying to do those costumes without doing those costumes. They're hinting at it. Like, they're taking inspiration, obviously, from the movies.
Yeah.
But I think they're taking just as much inspiration, if not more, from the comics.
I think the biggest ones that you could argue, and these are like relatively little things, is just Thor without a helmet, and that has plenty of like comic sort of precedent. But in non-comic, non-movie mediums, we tend to stick Thor with the helmet. And Bruce specifically calling back to the first Avengers with the whole purple shirt, beige trousers kind of combo.
Yeah, that more than anything else feels like they're taking inspiration from the movies there.
Yeah.
And Iron Man, I think he actually looks more like comic book Iron Man than he does movie Iron Man. Like, particularly with the faceplate.
Yeah, and because like again, we just got Endgame, which kind of did sort of like what I think most people imagine to be like quote unquote classic Iron Man armor with like the whole arm is gold and just the hands are red and stuff like that. But yeah, the game, I'm not really sure because there's so many different armors to compare it to and stuff. It definitely looks like its own thing though. So I'm not too pressed about that.
Yeah. And I think Widow more or less looks like she did in Age of Ultron, just without the blue streaks.
Yeah, the LED stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Caps is the only costume that I can really complain about. Everyone else I think looks pretty neat.
We got news shortly after E3 that this would not be an open world game. And me and you already talked about this, but
yeah, I
don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, okay, so there were two things that we discussed. We discussed the open world thing, and neither of us really had a big issue with that being, deconfirmed. And there was the discussion of the fact that the story, the main campaign, would be single player, and I wasn't surprised by that, and you mentioned being kind of a little surprised, but we can talk about that after the discussion of not being open world, which is like, yeah, it makes sense to me because the way that I think about the Avengers is that like they're not like Spider-Man. They don't the way that they go about like doing their work isn't roaming around looking for stuff to do. Like they have missions. So it only makes sense to me that their gameplay would be a mission-based type thing.
And they're more of like a globe-trotting group. Like they don't just stay in New York all the time.
Yeah, if you were gonna do a sandbox Avengers game, it would have to be the whole planet pretty much.
And the inciting incident of their story doesn't even take place in New York. It takes place in San Francisco.
Yeah, which people confirming. I didn't look that deep into it, but confirming, unconfirming, same universe as Spidey PS4, which would then tie into a line he has there about how the Avengers are always on the West Coast.
Sure. I mean, it's two separate studios. It's Insomniac and Square Enix. I don't really need a shared universe with these games.
Yeah, that's kind of where I stand on it, but people keep like, someone something somewhere confirmed.
It's not confirmed. People are just reaching.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, so I do like that as a sort of, again, it's doing its own thing. We're set in a different place. And just the story itself, we don't have that many details, but we know that like something goes wrong. The opening of this facility, like something goes really wrong involving the Terrigen crystals that they have. And what's his name? Taskmaster is involved. Taskmaster, who, just to again talk about design, if we're comparing, which I know we shouldn't, because like you just said, two different studios, I prefer the PS4 Spidey Taskmaster design. Something about the chrome and the really like just the completely dark eyes for this Taskmaster look weird to me.
It's a little more comics accurate, but fair enough.
Really? Am I wrong, or does he not have visible eyes in the comics? Or does it depend?
It does depend on what he's actually showing up in, because quite a few artists like to draw him like he is in this game, where he doesn't have eyes and he looks more like a skull, and then like other people will draw him with like the wide eyes.
But yeah, so the story is intriguing. We'll see how it actually plays out. But it's again, we're probably gonna keep saying this, but as far as like setups go, it definitely seems like we want to carve out sort of like our own identity as an adaptation, and I respect that.
Before I forget, I do want to bring up the other thing about them not using the likenesses for the actors. Because with the other E3 presentations that we got Cyberpunk 2047, which looks like a really cool sci-fi action game. Keanu Reeves is starring in that, and I mean, like, he's not the main character, but he's like one of the main characters that you're going to be interacting with a lot. And John Bernthal is in the newest Ghost Recon game as the guy you're going to be going up against. And I think the reason that they like have went on to do this versus, obviously Square Enix not being able to get the actors too, is because those two are like, legitimate like actors, like working man actors. They're not stars. And not to be, well, Keanu Reeves is a star, but you know what I mean. He's not a star in the traditional sense of the word, like Robert Downey, like a Robert Downey Jr. or Jennifer Lawrence.
I feel like
he's not going to command like millions upon millions of dollars to star in a game.
True, as far as like, because I think it's just there's a lot of different ways that you can define star, and as far as like the amount of money that they ask for or how much it would cost to get them in a thing, then definitely agreed they're not that kind of star. But for Keanu especially, and like especially very recently, it feels like it's been exponentially with the release of each John Wick film that's put him more and more in the spotlight, where the internet in particular has kind of decided that he's New Bay, and he's kind of got that Robert Downey Jr. type thing where just like everyone kind of agrees that they love him as an actor and as like a guy. And
But not to be disparaging to Robert Downey Jr., but Keanu Reeves certainly doesn't have Robert Downey Jr.'s ego. He's a lot more humble.
yeah, obviously. Like again, that's where the money comes in. But as far as like star power and like appeal to audiences, I'd say Keanu Reeves has it about the same. Where
But I'm only talking about it in relation to money because that's the determining factor in whether or not you're going to get those people to star in your game.
right, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like Keanu's popular enough to where a majority of the sales for Cyberpunk, I'd say, are gonna be on the fact that he's in it.
And, you know, John Bernthal's more of a B-level actor. He's not a Keanu Reeves, but at the same time, he is very beloved in quite a few of the roles he's played. Like, he's amazing in everything, but people love him for his performance as Punisher and the few seasons he was in Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that out there. Like, the reason why you can have actors like with their likenesses and then like starring and mocapping in those games is because those are not mega movie stars that are going to demand millions of dollars to be in the game. But yeah, I am looking forward to seeing what the story is going to be like. And apparently, it is kind of partially Tony's fault directly because he knew that the power source they were using for that new helicarrier was unstable. And as Bruce says in that clip they showed us, he paraded it around anyway in front of the whole world. And terrorists tried to nab it. And it looks like we killed Captain America pretty early in this game.
He's fine, probably.
Yeah, like they're gonna want to have him as a playable character for more than just the opening sequence. So, you know, maybe he's, you know, nomad and just on the lam for a while and they have to find him. But I don't know, I do kind of like that for a premise, especially because there's no way they could have known who Marvel was going to kill off in Endgame when they were making this game and coming up with a story for it. So it is just kind of nice that we don't have what would look like Iron Man dying again when we just saw that.
Yeah. Interesting that we're also doing a 5-year jump here.
Yeah, that is pretty coincidental.
Yeah, and like, so you've got people complaining that Hawkeye's not in it. I'm convinced he's going to show up at some point, either later in the story or he's going to be sort of like an additional hero. And they've mentioned, I really like a great selling point is that they're like, heroes who won't be available initially within the game or will sort of like dole them out with no extra charge. And like the crowd goes nuts, and that's really, yeah, that's good because a lesser game, or it's not even lesser game, but like I feel the cheaper move would have been like, oh, you want all this cool stuff and these other heroes? Well, give us more money. But no, they're just gonna sort of like give them out when they're ready. And it's also good for the actual developers, so they get to spend more time on completing stuff while still not making everyone wait just for the product as a whole. So that's good.
Yeah, they said there's going to be more and more characters added to the roster. So there's no doubt in my mind Hawkeye will be in the game. And I didn't need them to throw everything at us in this first E3 presentation, especially because there's still a year to go before the game comes out. And I don't need you to show me everything. Like, a lot of people are mad we didn't actually see like a full segment of gameplay. I'm not particularly mad about that because, you know, as I said before, like they don't even have the graphics fully there yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm perfectly happy with what they decided to show us, and
But I expect to I expect to have some kind of gameplay sort of like presentation within a couple of months.
And the other thing, when you look at the E3 footage for Spider-Man PS4 a year before its release, versus what we actually got with the game, the difference is damn near night and day. Like they improved upon those graphics from then, and you can tell things are clearly different, and coloring and certain lighting of scenes is slightly different. So
Yeah, like a really small snippet earlier today of like really early Spidey PS4 footage, and like the swinging, just the swinging animation looks totally different. Like it's not appealing at all. And like if you like a big once the game came out, like the swinging was the major selling point, or at least one of them. And so like you would not be able to sell it on that based on the way that the swinging looked like initially, like early stages.
exactly. So I think people need to, like, I don't know, look into things more and come, like, not just come from a, I don't know, position of ignorance, not to sound too harsh.
Yeah.
But ignorance is not an inherently, like, derogatory or mean term. It just means lack of knowledge.
Yeah. When I earlier mentioned like people being ignorant about stuff, I don't necessarily mean that as an insult. I just mean that as literally there are people who don't understand how things work, and just if they were more knowledgeable, that would definitely impact like how they feel about this stuff.
For sure, yeah. I did you? So basically, you didn't find out about this game until you said like what, 2-3 months ago?
5 or 6 months ago, or if I knew about it before then, I'd probably just slip my mind. But yeah, at some point, like not too long ago, I hear Square Enix is developing an Avengers game and everyone's really hyped up over it, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even wow that's not anything that I would expect, but it sounds really cool.
Have you played any of their games before?
Oh yeah, because like it's everyone knows Square from like primarily two franchises, either Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. I'm like just barely into Final Fantasy. Like I know it mainly through other people talking about it and watching playthroughs. But Kingdom Hearts I've been a massive fan of for a while. And next to Spidey PS4, Kingdom Hearts 3 has been like the video game that I've like sunk hours and hours and hours into over the past several months. So that's been my whole thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great, man. I know them, as I said before, mostly through their Tomb Raider stuff.
Mm. And it's actually really ironic that or not ironic, this is probably not the right word, but pretty cool that they're doing this property, given that part of the thing with Kingdom Hearts is that everyone was like, okay, should we or shouldn't we expect Marvel characters to show up at some point? And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Of course they wouldn't. But clearly someone on the team was like, oh, you know, we're sort of tight with Disney. Let's pull some strings. Let's get some Marvel money up in here.
And when they first announced this, they said it was going to be a multi-game deal. So there are going to be games after this.
Right, because like going into this, it was never just called like the Avengers like singular game that they were working on. It was always the Avengers project. So I guess the project encompasses the multiple games.
And that's interesting because with their deal with Square Enix, it was kind of just make Spider-Man PS4. Like a sequel to that game was not, or in the original contract. So that was not a given that we would ever get a sequel to that game. But with this, we know there's going to be maybe spin-offs, if not a direct sequel.
Yeah, I would expect it to be if not a direct sequel, then sort of something that ties in some way. Like maybe not necessarily story, but like these takes on the characters again, or a side thing, or I'm not sure.
And I would assume that the main villain of this game, whoever it is, wouldn't be Thanos. Like they'd probably try to get away from
Yeah.
a major like MCU tie-in like that, so they'd probably want to go for somebody else. And
Yeah,
they showed Hulk fighting Abomination.
Yeah.
We
Like
know.
I think obviously they sort of like chose this E3 to really unveil it due to the proximity to Endgame, and everyone's got Avengers on the brain, and that's going to lead to a lot more discussion and eyes on your new take. But yeah, I don't think we're likely to do Thanos. I'd be surprised, honestly, if he's more than like an Easter egg in this game, if that. Like, I don't think he's gonna have an involvement in this story at all. We're definitely dealing with more than just Taskmaster or Abomination, probably. I'd be surprised if it was just them. If there was a big villain to this game, because I don't even want to speculate too much on that, just because we have so little story to go on. But if there was a big bad guy, my leaning right now is like, I don't know, someone like Doctor Doom, just someone who's like, who we haven't really done yet in any kind of medium like this, but whose sort of aspirations are also global. I don't know, there really isn't enough to go on to even make like an educated guess yet.
That's true. That's actually who I'm hoping for, though.
Yeah.
Because he's one of my favorite Marvel villains, and he's been horribly butchered, like Deadpool and Origins butchered in both movies that he's been in. Well, he's been in 3 movies technically, because he was in the first 2.
Let's say.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, that's part of like what I was getting to earlier, is that like more now than ever, video games are kind of approaching movies as far as their place on the world stage and the degree to which, especially in Japan and America, people sort of like pay attention to them as storytelling mediums and as big pieces of media to be widely consumed and talked about for a long time. Like what just happened with Kingdom Hearts 3 and with Spidey PS4 upon their release, and stuff like Smash Brothers. Like a decade ago, that kind of discussion doesn't happen with video games the same way it happens with movies, where a big movie comes out and it's the topic of discussion for a while, for like a couple of weeks. And now video games are at that place where I think part of what makes people like subconsciously want to compare this to the movie is like, okay, this is the first Avengers game in like this era of video games where they're sort of being taken as seriously and being discussed like movies. And so, like you said, we've kind of screwed Doctor Doom up in the movie medium. Now that video games are kind of as big, or not as big of a medium, but approaching that in the way that they're talked about, this would be a good opportunity to throw in Doctor Doom and show a huge audience that like he's a cool villain.
Yeah. And especially because we're not going to actually see him in MCU proper for at least 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm. Although I wouldn't act if, because I don't know, that's a discussion for another time. But I think we're definitely going to do Fantastic Four in the MCU before we do X-Men, and I think we maybe do Doom before we even do Fantastic Four.
Really?
Or at least that's what I would do. And I get that there's a lot of ways in which you could. I don't think it's a given, but I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility that we at least name drop Latveria before we see Doctor Doom.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, it's gonna be a while regardless, like at least 3 or 4 years. And so, like, this game's coming out, like, we can do whatever we want, I assume that there's not gonna be any rights issues with this game. So just go all in, man. Just don't even stop at Doom. Like, if you want to have, that's again, just like, I don't want to let my mind run away too much because we don't have enough story to go on, and you don't want to like keep hyping yourself up because then look what happens, you get disappointed. But just like when I think like, oh, all the different stuff that it would be cool to see different takes on, or more comic accurate if that's the way that we decide we want to lean, or whatever, it's like, this game has the potential to be a really, really big deal and sort of do a lot of characters and a lot of story possibilities that the other mediums aren't doing. So, I don't know, it just makes you hopeful that they take advantage of that.
Yeah. And all we really know is that it's an original story, and we know the big exciting incident. We know that they're having this big celebration in San Diego. They're calling it A Day, and a big cataclysm happens. Like the helicarrier gets destroyed, and it emits this energy pulse that kind of destroys a big chunk of San Francisco. And the Avengers are kind of at fault for that, particularly Iron Man. And 5 years later, something's probably going to, like some villain's going to show up, and they're all going to need to come back together and unite to stop him or her.
Yeah, I'm sure it's once it actually, again, we're talking about adjust expectations. This is the first we're seeing of this. Really, all we need right now is the most basic of plot setups.
Yeah, and I think they did a pretty solid job, and I was really happy with what I saw. I'm not as excited for this as I am Spider-Man PS4, just because Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. Like, that's the only reason I'm not as excited, but I'm still very, very excited, and I think this will almost undoubtedly be a good game. I'm very confident of that.
Yeah. Like, again, anything can happen. Maybe it'll come out and people will be like, oh no, it's not good. All of our fears were confirmed. But I think it's likely that I trust the guys working on it. They seem like they care about what they're doing. I think it's gonna be fine. And I think, like, again, assuming that all things go well, I think we could be looking at something as good as Spidey PS4. Like, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on it, but it seems like something that we might get. So, high hopes.
High hopes. Okay. Well, I think we said pretty much everything we had to say. This was a really, really solid year for E3 in general, and this is definitely one of the titles I was looking forward to seeing the most. So I know for a lot of people it did disappoint, but not for me. I was very pleased with what I saw.
Yeah, I liked that. I liked what Fantasy 7. Like, and this is just me in video games as a whole. I tend to be more of a Nintendo person. They're kind of like my default winner of E3 every year, just because I'm more invested in those properties, and I'm always kind of more interested and impressed with what they've got to show. But I went from sort of like mildly curious about the Avengers project to, oh, if this all comes together, then I'm definitely probably gonna buy this. So yeah.
And just to do a real quick honorable mention, I'm also very excited for that Star Wars game. Fallen Order looks freaking amazing.
Yeah. I have a very big, strong reaction to it. Some people seem kind of mixed. But, yeah, I don't know. A lot of people are saying good things about it, so we'll see how that pans out.
All right, guys. Throw out your comments in the throw out your comments. Throw out your opinions about the Avengers E3 presentation. If you saw it, let us know if you're excited for the game. If you've played any other of the games from Square Enix, how you feel about them as a company in general. Do you like their games? Do you not like their games? What other stuff did you see from E3, if anything else? What games are you most excited to play?
Do you like designs?
Yeah, do you like the designs? I think they're all fine except for Cap's, but I don't know.
I will
That might
say,
be-
just because I forgot about it until just now, my other thing that I'll complain about is Thor's breastplates looking like giant, like silver dinner plates.
I mean, they've certainly been that big in the comics, so I don't know.
But yeah, we're good. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you later.